Welcome to Treating the Shen, Module 2, Video 3. What is the Self and the Other? My name is Paul Chapman. I practice Oneness Acupuncture Therapy. I also mentor people who are suffering with traumatic memory, and I'm the designer and mentor in the course MPNA, the Emotion Master Program in Acupuncture. Perhaps the most important part as a practitioner of the Shen is self-understanding, and in the previous lesson, under the foundation of oneness, we looked at the subject, Know Thyself. Now let us explore this concept through traditional Chinese medical terms, specifically introducing the first element in creation, that of water, and its connection to the genetic shadow. The trigrams of Qian, heaven, and Kun, earth, will be looked at for their guidance, and also the REN and CHONG channels. We will also explore these concepts through the specific psychological aspects of the urinary bladder, kidney, gall bladder, and liver meridians, and their connections to the central nervous and autonomic nervous systems. The Zen Buddhist monk, Dogen, states, "To study the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be enlightened by all things." Now, understanding of form, the 10,000 things, is a method to understand self. And to attain an understanding of self requires a knowledge of the process of creation. With this understanding, we can develop a framework that helps us to identify good and bad through differentiation of what constitutes good and evil on an individual basis. And it should always be our aim to gain greater and greater clarity of our own working mechanisms, and in so doing, begin to fine-tune this ability when supporting others. In this way, we may be able to assist a person in their own journey towards personal integrity, rather than impede them due to the projection of our own unidentified characteristics. So to begin, in oneness therapy, we are always looking to simplify, which means we are attempting to help people receive more of life, to train their thinking to find the blessings in all things, to utilize all events so that they may be open to receive, and in this reception transform all things into the fertilizer of wisdom development. Now, we are not given a good or a bad life. We are given a life, and it's up to us to make it good or bad. And a word of caution: whenever you hear the term good or bad, allow it to awaken you to the awareness that there is a differentiation occurring. So how can we learn to accept all things as beneficial? Now, in this quote, Heraclitus states that the opposite is beneficial, and from things that differ comes the fairest attunement, as all things are born through strife. Imagine the immense effort it takes to be actual to give birth to a child, for example. And in the case of consciousness, this means observing or identifying the opposite. However, to observe the opposite, we must first understand the concept of self. Now, I'm going to share this video on YouTube. So the students in MPNA will already know what this slide means. But for those who haven't studied at all with integral freedom, this might look to you like a blank piece of white paper. And that's indeed what it is. And this is representative of the state of Wuji. Wuji in Chinese creation myth is the Tao, you could say, the empty space from which all life, all forms emanate. And we symbolically understand this in the creation of our paper, in that it comes as a white paper. And on this white paper is limitless potential for creation. So this is an undifferentiated, limitless potential. And in regard to self, there is no self here. Now, once we add a definition, Here it is the boundary seen in the form of a circle. Immediately there is a description, a differentiation, an identification, and all of the myriad connections that flow from this. Therefore, what was once identifiable now becomes the identified, which means it exists without the limitless potential of the Wu-Ji. And I use the word without for good reason. The with section includes the origin, as there is always the supreme moral principle in all things. And the supreme moral principle, we could shortlist that to say it's unity. Now the out section points to the fact that it is now outside of the limitless, simply by being limited, as limitless and limited must exist in different states. Now, of course, it seems obvious, yet it is the key. And how does it help someone accept more of life? If we look at an individual person, the moment this boundary manifests, a sense of self or separateness is born. The state can be recognized perhaps within the psyche as a sense of, when you feel like you just don't fit in. And yet at the same time, you have this limitless capacity to expand, even if this capacity is simply following a thought process. Now, the straight line moving to a small dot at the center of the circle represents the movement from 0 to 1. And in the binary system of the I Ching, 0 and 1, all the numbers are contained within 0 to 1. And it also places the identification of self at the center of the circle. And in nature, we can see this in the sun as the center of our solar system. The sun shines its life-giving energy throughout its system and controls to varying degrees the movement within its system. In the same way, the identification of the self affects all that is contained within its solar system, within its boundary. Therefore, the contents contained within the boundary are all the events, peoples, places, experiences, not only of your own life, but also that of your ancestry. And what's more important is how they reflect back. Gives you deep insight into how the identification of self at the center operates its control. Now let us diverge a little and explore the self through TCM. And we are going to begin with the water and its connection to the genetic shadow. And again, a word of caution, there are many possibilities when using forms such as yin-yang or the 5 elements to explain certain phenomena, especially within the psyche. So beware of becoming too fixed in this or any other analogy. The aim here is to gain a little insight into development as a means of recognizing form creation, form growth, form structure, form maturation, and specifically within the individual, and how this manifests with traumatic memories within each and every moment. This may then become an aid to be able to see a return to simpleness and form a remedy. And just briefly, the genetic shadow is quite a large concept to grasp. But if we just bring it again down to a simple form, we can say that the genetic shadow is the belief structures that run through your genetic DNA. So it's specific to your familial line and also specific to the rules and conditions and values of the time in which we live, the structure. And I particularly connect it to the Hun, the element of the Hun. But it also comes in with the Jing, the essence. Now, as water is the first element created after the union of yin-yang, this is where this story begins. If we can help make a tiny adjustment to help transform a controlling self-projection into a receptive illumination, the results in our clients and in ourselves are literally life-changing. Now, at conception, the totality of wisdom contained in the entire boundaries of the mother and father combine to create new life. This is fixed as the root and known as the pre-heavenly Jing. The root will reflect itself in Bahu as the entrance of the Tao and Hui Yin as the home of the genetic shadow. In the Bagua, this is demonstrated with the trigrams of Qian, or heaven, associated to the Dew vessel, or the governing vessel, as a representative of the Yang, and Kun, earth, associated to the Ren, or conception vessel, as the representative of the Yin. Now, Yuan Duveen, a master of stems and branches acupuncture, suggests that when there is an issue with the pre-heavenly Jing, to work with the Chong channel, as the Ju and Ren are the Yang and Yin expressions of the Chong Mai. And in the exposition on the 8 extraordinary vessels by Chase and Shima, they give the treatment holds for the Chong as urinary bladder 11 and 57, Ren 4 and 17, Ju 15, 14 and 20, lung 1, and stomach 30, 36, 37, 39, 15 and 16. And they also give the trajectory holes, so the pathway channel, as stomach 30, it emerges from the chi thoroughfare at stomach 30 and hones to Ren 1. And there's also a vessel that runs down through the legs, through the foot yang min and foot xiao yin. And also briefly, there's a connecting vessel that also goes to the foot tai yin channels as well, to really ground the Chong in the earth. But I would say that the Chong holds the genetic memory in the Hui Yin area. This is in Taoist philosophy is called the first soul house, or in Indian philosophy it's called the first chakra. And the trajectory holds also the kidney channel, kidney 11, 12, 13, all the way up to kidney 21. And these points are given here to arouse your interest and curiosity. For example, when we look at needling stomach 36, 37, and 39 with balance method acupuncture, and we use the imaging quality of balance method, we can see that stomach 36, 37, and 39 have a strong influence in the abdominal areas. And when in balance method, the whole leg is imaged to the trunk, whereas the knee is the area of the navel, the ankle and the foot as the genital area, and the thigh, top of the thigh, hip area is connected to the shoulder. So when you needle stomach 36, 37, and 39, in this image, you're actually treating the lower abdominal space. And also when you reverse the image, which we can do as well, you're also treating the upper abdominal space and the lower ribs. And yet, also in balance method, the stomach meridian only balances itself, the stomach, and the spleen meridians on the abdomen, on the anterior part of the body. And yet, do you feel that the stomach's pure yang ascension and its psychological chi direction of downwards are kind of linked to the Chong Mai pathology, where counterflow is prominent? And also interestingly, kidney 16, which is classically indicated for harmonizing the stomach and down-bearing counterflow, is the main treatment area for middle GI pathologies when incorporating the Chong vessel. And for upper GI pathologies, it's more like REN 17, whereas the lower GI, it's actually directly on the umbilicus, on the navel that we use. So I feel that the stomach's quite important in its connection to the Chong and the foot xiao yin. And we'll explore that in another video, but in particular to the aspect of creation through King Wen's Gua, where the water trigram is that of Kan water, and has a direct connection to the stomach meridian. But first of all, in this video, let's look at the hexagrams created from the 2 primary trigrams of Qian and Kun. Now, advance, and there's 2 numbering systems here. First one's for the digitalization that Dr. Tan brought in as, so it's number 18 in Dr. Tan's system, but it's number 11 in the I Ching book. And this one's number 81 in Dr. Tan's system, but number 12 in the I Ching book. And advance says that when the creative powers of heaven and earth move towards each other, there is advance and prosperity. And here we see the trigram of Chien is placed underneath that of Kun, that of earth. And earth descends downwards and heaven ascends. So they meet each other, they have an appropriate connection. And the counsel for this is that the wise to prefer to live in harmony with the laws of nature, to be content with one's fate and never blame heaven or others. And the other here is quite significant. And in this way, the creative can give full play to his ability and wisdom, and through his generous connections, aid to expand and influence the people. When we reverse these, we get the trigram of hindrance. And here the creative power and heaven and earth move apart. Heaven ascends, earth descends. There's no connection, no joining. Oops. Now, hindrance advises us that when advance reaches its climax, it moves to hindrance. And advance tells us that we need to remain watchful in times when life is abundant, and not to take this abundant benefits for granted. And also not to become inattentive in times of peace or in times of danger, so that we may be able to keep the influence of advance within our environment for longer. And we may be able to use the created hexagram of advance to help in particular cases where you can see that a person is dominated by their ancestral shadow, yet is having difficulty in seeing the connection from their current situation to their past or ancestral history. And one of the aspects of oneness acupuncture therapy is through the needling sensation of connecting a present situation to a past memory. Now, Chien relates to the Dew vessel, and Kun relates to the REN, giving this hexagram great potential to harmonize the yang and the yin. And harmonization in the I Ching is classified as supportive communication. And as I said before, in oneness acupuncture therapy, this implies creating connections from the present to the past in order to manifest understanding. And it's also the unification of the internal state excuse me, to the external reflections. Now, Chien and Kun combined also represent the water and wood elemental meridians, that of kidney, liver in the yin, urinary bladder and gall bladder in the yang. And in my opinion, the water element is associated to the central nervous system. Water contains the genetic shadow through which it interprets data from the external environment. The CNS deals with our thought processes and the pathways by which these thoughts manifest into action. And water is strongly associated to the marrow, the jing, the brain, the spine, and the control of the 7 glands, or the endocrine system. And the endocrine system regulates our hormonal responses to the external environment. And as we know, water is also associated to fear and to longevity. The liver gallbladder connects to the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is controlled from impulses within the brain and via the peripheral nervous system. Now, these impulses are sent to the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus responds to this reception through the secretion of releasing hormones, particularly to the anterior pituitary. And it does this via the blood. And it also connects to the posterior pituitary through the nervous system. Now, the pituitary then regulates the body to match its external reality. So in short, this means that the 2 primary trigrams, Chien and Kun, have the symbolic ability to balance the internal with the external, the yin with the yang, the fixed with the flexible, the hard with the soft, the directive survival instincts of the central nervous system and autonomic nervous system, and the fixed genetic conditioning of nature and nurture. Now, through the Ju and Ren and the Biao Li connections of water and wood to the trigrams of Qian and Kun, we may see the representation of winter and spring in earthly existence and limitless potential for new growth in the heavenly existence. Now, let me explain those a little bit. And here in this diagram, we could say that the urinary bladder is representative of the Qian trigram is representative of the father aspect, and the Kun trigram is representative of the mother aspect, and in between is the child. And this interaction goes both ways, from father to child, from child to father. And if we look at this in relation to the self, that put the self as the child at the center, and the influences that are coming back through the masculine and feminine principles within its boundary. Now, the differentiation of trigrams, Qian, is also connected to what's called the superior person. And the nature of the superior man is to ascend in alignment with the principles of heaven, or Qian. And these principles mean that all initiative is prosperous, meaning it is driven by the principle of unity. It is smooth, meaning that the path of action does not create undue disruption. It is favorable and beneficial, meaning that all prosper and it is carried out with steadfastness. This means that the ability to endure is a given, as the initiating origin is natural and requires an expenditure of energy suitable to the situation. And finally, it's upright, meaning that its initiation action endures despite the inevitable declining cycle of nature. Qian achieves this by descending or responding with the principles of the earth, or Kun. Now, all initiative is received and responded to with flexibility. Devotion to the principle of unity, and humility, which is the gratitude for the life-nurturing qualities of earth and heaven, allow Kun to submit to the initiation of heaven in order that each form be satisfied. When we apply this thinking to the water and wood element, we may see that the trigrams of Qian and Kun help us to realize the activities of human development from a oneness acupuncture therapy perspective. The trigram Kun, the yin, tells us that the development of wisdom and the sense of freedom are both the pathway and the result of flexible responsiveness. As a pathway, flexible responsiveness teaches us that each situation is an opportunity to observe ourselves in spontaneous reception. Observation may begin with how do we approach. Now, this is the beginning of the four principles of observation. So how do we approach? For example, how do you feel about this slide? What forms have been created in your mind? Do you think this person is brave or courageous? Do you think they are engaging in life to its fullest potential? Now, how about if I told you that a tiger had just escaped from its enclosure at the zoo? This person just went to the zoo for a nice day, and the tiger was really pissed off. And it was just in front of the concrete wall that this lady is hiding behind. Now, would that change your perception? So how do we approach? Now, how we approach tells us a little bit about how we receive. The philosophy of oneness acupuncture therapy supports 100% reception, the ability to transform good and bad data into appropriate initiation. And that's intention, you could say. Through 100% reception, we are given maximum opportunities to develop wisdom and freedom. Now, how we respond teaches us about flexibility. And through our responses to situations, through our behaviours, our internal selves become visible. And responding leads us to observing. The reactions or ripples that come back to us from the boundary of our circle, from our environment, helps us to identify our original intention or initiation. The external environment gives us the ability to see our own shadows, the parts of us that we are blind to. As each shadow reveals its form, we are then able to fine-tune it through the power of decision. And in this slide, this wonderful picture here of this sculpture and the shadow it creates. You know, obviously the symbols are very, very different, and yet this is what the light is creating. It's creating this shadow. And when we can see a shadow, when we actually begin to identify, and we identify it through the reflective conditions of our environment, the people that we associate with, they give us clear insight into how we are. Then we have a decision to choose. So the how to approach, how to receive, how to respond, what to observe, and then what to change. However, decision requires some foundational qualities. We cannot expect a person to simply rely on their own willpower without an understanding of oneness philosophy and the genetic shadow. The genetic shadow is specifically designed to bring to consciousness all fragmented parts of unified consciousness. It exists in the same element as the will, that of water. The unconscious will is generating the experiences in life, or perhaps we could just say, generating the perceptions of what we are experiencing in life. Now, often what we're experiencing in life is judged, isn't it? We put it into good and bad concepts, and we move towards what's good, and we try to move away from what's bad. And yet here it said that the genetic shadow is specifically designed to bring to consciousness all fragmented parts of unified consciousness, which means that anything that's in our genetic line that holds a belief structure that is opposed to unification, and that's any form of judgment we may have, then our internal impulses are going to create external situations to help us see in ourselves where we are disconnected from unifying. So often when we create havoc in our lives, this is a gift from the heart, you could say, a gift from the Shen, that keeps coming back until we actually finally see it, we finally get it. We finally don't have to blame others on the outside for our problems. We actually see this essence where we think, all right, okay, people are treating me like I'm a loser, or like I've got no value in life, because of the way that I'm communicating that, or the way that I'm reacting to those things. Now, if I change this a little bit, if I change the perception of how I see the power of people outside and replace that power into perhaps I would change the words that I use, or perhaps that I would change the stance that I stand with when I'm feeling intimidated by people. We make very tiny corrections from within. We reconnect to our internal source, which is the source of power, and we don't waste it by giving it away outside. Now, perceptions are very strong. For example, in this slide, this person may use large amounts of willpower in the action of inactivity. And he is required to make a conscious choice to avoid situations that will stimulate the desire towards psychopathy. Choices which may seem to others as a choice to be a lazy sod or to disengage from life. Now, each person's journey is unique, and perhaps our biggest mistake is thinking we know what is best for another. So to have the strength to decide, we can look again at the Biaoli relationships of water and wood. The qualities of kun, the yin, is abbreviated here to flexible responsiveness. Stored within water, the Jing essence is the genetic shadow. The genetic shadow is a progressively developing element within the DNA that brings to conscious awareness aspects of familial belief structures that inhibit reception based on the principles of heaven, of principles of Qian. And it's the mechanism that allows compassion to express itself. Compassion for others, compassion for self. The yang aspects of water, the urinary bladder, helps us with endurance through the quality of hope. And I heard a thing on the show the other day that said hope is an undisclosed disappointment. And I'll have to ponder on that one, because that's an earth-water connection. And in the reverse Kerr cycle. It's an interesting phrase, but in my opinion at the moment, hope is an attribute of urinary bladder, which I'll show you in a moment. Now, hope allows us to understand what is required to protect the developing consciousness, and at the same time, what needs to be released from the consciousness. And it does this through its child, the gallbladder. The gallbladder is the seat of initiation. With support from its mother, the familial belief structure, and guidance from its father, the urinary bladder, the gallbladder is infused with courage and confidence to make choices. Gallbladder's connection to yin wood reveals the necessary flexibility within its thinking to continue with patience, hope, and endurance towards ever-deepening levels of integral action and personal freedom. And in this chart, there's 5 aspects. So we have the meridian here. We have the meridian's function. I've classified this as protection for urinary bladder, initiation for gallbladder, wisdom for kidney, and freedom for liver. We then have the intention of the meridian, the energy that moves outwards with this, and its endurance with urinary bladder, decision or choice from the gallbladder, how to receive in the kidney, and how to create in the liver. And the sign of balance of these meridians is that one has a sense of hope with the urinary bladder, one has a sense of confidence or courage with the gallbladder, one has the ability to be patient with the kidney, and one has the resilience to move out with one's plans in the liver. And the signs of imbalance are the opposite. So people that come in with levels of hopelessness, their urinary bladder meridian is dysfunctioning, and we have to look towards its father, which may be the large intestine, or we may look to its Biaoli relationship with the kidney. Or there are quite a few other connections we can look at, but basically the same with indecision, gallbladder is imbalanced. The lack of ability to rest or reckless behavior is attributed to an imbalanced kidney meridian. And the lack of ability to create, to move outwards with our creative sources, which results in depression. And then the reflection is what comes back from your environment. So hyperdefensiveness is a sign of the urinary bladder. A sense of great injustice is the control of water over wood. That things are seen not as a gift, but are seen as obstacles, is the challenge side of the kidney. And belief structures that result in biases that create separation of some form is the sign of liver. So both the trigrams and hexagrams Qian and Kun, plus their combinations of advance and hindrance, can be used with any meridian pattern to suit the particular characteristics of each individual according to the level of understanding and knowledge of the practitioner. In this way, we can use the 2 primal shapes of Qian and Kun and apply I Ching Bagua acupuncture theory to work with particular patterns of familial, emotional, and mental imbalances. But we will have to leave that until the next video lesson. So for now, I hope you enjoyed this further exploration of self, and I look forward to sharing with you ideas of how we can put this into acupuncture practice. So thank you for listening, and bye for now.